That's not very
Good
good.
afternoon, and thank you for joining today's webinar on developing health and safety, capability and culture. My name is Holly and I'm part of the professional development team here at IIRSM. Today's presentation will be delivered by Kevin Hard of Inspiration All, Andy Hutt of Safe 365 and Oliver Sanandres of IAG Cargo. Before I hand over, there are just a few housekeeping type things to run through first. So to begin with, you'll be on mute for the duration of the webinar, but you'll be able to use the chat function on the bottom right of the screen to ask your questions. And secondly, the webinar is being recorded and a copy of the recording will be available on our YouTube channel after the event. Okay, that's enough from me. Kevin, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today in wondrous times. I'm going to set the scene into understanding safety culture, what it's all about, what we find around the world as Ryder Marsh O'Cade, as global sort of safety consultants. Set the scene and then hand over to Andy, who's going to show you actually what we can do about it, how we can measure our safety maturity and some solutions he's got. And then Ollie's going to talk a little bit at the end as a user, exactly how it works. Excuse me. So what we're going to go through is about caring for your people. Safety is critical because if you care about their safety, you care about your people. It's as simple as that. And I'm going to take you through some of the things that we've found that you get out of caring for your people, not just improvement in safety, but well-being, business performance, and other areas as well. Then talk about safety culture, where are you now? And I'm sure a lot of you out there don't actually probably know. Where would you like to be? We'd all like to be compliant or beyond compliant, of course. And how we're going to get there, and hand over to Andy and show exactly how you can measure yourselves and see where you are. So I think it's fairly obvious that in the long run, companies that promote and protect their people are amongst the most successful and competitive in the world. I don't think anybody can argue against that. And I think it's important here to realise this is not just the UK and Europeans we're talking about. We've worked around the world. I've worked in China, India and Middle East. And if you care about your people, you'll get the same sort of success, the same sort of feedback if you care and value them. So it's a great statement that actually taking care of your people is the right thing to do. Of course it is. It's a smart thing to do. I'm going to show you what that means later. And it's actually the legal thing to do. And I think a lot of people do actually forget that. They forget about accountability, responsibility. It is a legal thing to do. The HSE are doing the right thing in terms of getting people to compliance. We need to be compliant. So the right thing to do. Here's some feedback from Gallup. And again, working around the world, we've seen this with clients all over the world, that when employees are engaged, when you care about them, you value them, take fewer unhealthy days as a result of physical or mental illness. Well, that's fantastic, isn't it? Less likely to be diagnosed with a new disease in the next year. Less likely to be diagnosed with anxiety and depression. So we tend to focus nowadays on well-being, but why haven't we always done it? Safety was focused on in the 90s and the noughties, and now everybody's jumping on the bandwagon of well-being. Well, actually, if we care about people, you're going to get this anyway. So this is what we're going to discuss, and we find this literally not just in the UK but around the world. The smart thing to do, well, if you look on the left-hand side here, this is what we find, that if you're not engaged, if you don't feel cared for at work, then you're going to have these traits, and they're not very good at all. And this is why organizations, they call in mental health first aiders, because of all the issues on the left-hand side. But then you chuck them back into the same blooming culture and wonder why things aren't improving too much. So looking on the right-hand side of this screen, if people feel valued, feel cared for, do you know what? There's a hell of a lot of good stuff comes out of this. Positive, more focused, creative, innovative. And that's about sustainability. It's about discretionary effort. And I think a lot of organizations don't understand that actually compliance isn't a given. People don't have to come to work to be compliant. It's up to them, it's up to you, how your relationship with them, if they're going to be compliant or not. And on the right-hand side, they're much more likely to be and give you the discretionary effort that everybody wants. So being the smart thing to do, on the left-hand side, this is where you get your presenteeism. Yeah, people aren't really there. Their eyes are open, their ears are open, but they're on the beach with Boris Johnson or something, or down the wine bar with their mates. They're not there. And if you go to conferences on well-being, you'll see this is actually has I think between 2 and 6 times more impact than absenteeism. So you want to be thinking about these sort of things. Again, absenteeism on the left, these people on the left-hand side who aren't cared for or valued take about 10 to 12 days a year off on average. On the right-hand side, you're going to get better performance. Why wouldn't you? You're going to get better quality. Yeah, people are actually caring, they're creative, they're in a positive mindset. Better resilience. So I don't just mean organizational resilience, but personal resilience, because on the right hand side you're much more likely to have oxytocin flowing around your body than on the left hand side, which is cortisol, the stress stroke. Retention recruitment. If any HR people are out there, or SMEs with not too many people, retention recruitment is massive, isn't it? Who wants to work for a company where people are on the left-hand side? You know, they'll be in the pub saying, what a horrible place to work this is. How are you going to increase your retention, your recruitment with an organisation that doesn't care about its people? Of course, that has an impact on the brand. And going on from there, we talk about quality of working life. Yeah, people on the left-hand side, they're not going to jump out of bed and go, woohoo, let's go to work today. It's going to be brilliant. They're the ones that turn over 6, 7 times, turn the alarm off. They don't want to get out of bed and go to work. On the right-hand side, these guys are jumping out of bed, hopefully, and saying, do you know what? It's going to be a good day at work today. So it has a massive impact. We've done some research into corporate social responsibility, the impact of engagement or engaged organizations. And if you're a senior manager, part of the senior management team, this is something you need to be thinking about, because if we can prove that corporate social responsibility and sustainability improve, then again, why wouldn't you care about your people? Caring about their safety shows you care about them if you're genuine about it and authentic. Talked about sustainability, again, of the organisation, and people get more involved with weekends, with charities, with other sort of work in the community if they're at the right-hand side of the graph there. And of course, where's safety better? It's going to be on the right-hand side, isn't it? Because people are involved. You're not telling them what to do, you're actually asking, you're collaborating with them, and safety improves dramatically. Of course, that links into risk, organizational risk, and personal risk as well. Because on the left-hand side, again, we talk about well-being and suicides increasing. You need to look at your culture, change your culture, and that starts with caring about people's safety. So it's also the legal thing to do. It's a smart thing to do. It's the right thing to do, but it's also the legal thing to do. And this sort of following couple of slides, questions from Mike Appleby, who works with us in terms of advising clients on their legal, I guess, responsibilities. And see, these are some of the questions that will come up in court. You might be asked, if anything ever goes wrong, which hopefully it won't, you need to be thinking about these sort of things. So are you aware of your own job responsibilities in terms of safety? Who's accountable for safety? Quite simple questions, but some people we go to and ask say, I don't know, it must be somebody else in the company, I'll go and find out. We're all accountable, we're all responsible. In terms of accountability, it's the senior team. So if something happens and you're in court, before the event, did you have these things in place? We were as ready as we could reasonably be. Well, were you? Have you consulted with your people? Do you know what actually is going on in the business? Or are you sat behind a computer all day looking at data? We work closely with all our people. And that means the front line, the managers, the supervisors, everybody is involved with the safety. If you go out and tell people what to do, you're never going to learn anything. If you go out and listen to them, you'll start to hear things, you start to learn things. People won't hide things. So you need to work closely with all your people. It's absolutely critical. Listen. Didn't talk to them, didn't talk at them. We listened to them. We encouraged change, encouraged new ideas, and coordinated actions. Safety of our people came first by a very long way. Did it? Or is it about productivity? Is it about finances? These sort of things you need to ask yourselves. And I talk to a lot of leaders, say, yeah, we do all this. Well, go and talk to your people out in the business, and perhaps they won't agree with you. Perhaps they'll think, well, actually, no, they don't really care about us. So you need to be thinking about these things quite seriously. The top took and takes a vigorous interest. Saving money was not a consideration. Safety. How many people do we go to and say, just get it out the door, just get it done? the language of productivity. Well, actually, if you're doing that, you need to think carefully about that. So if something does happen, sadly, then again, you're going to be asked these questions. We had a plan. It worked well. Yeah, we know where our safety culture is. We're working on it. And as Ollie said to me, who's presenting later, it's about showing you're working out. It's about showing you're doing something, that you're responsible, you're caring, you're trying to improve things. You've got a plan and you're working on it. Show you're working out. We acted quickly, decisively, and sensibly. Well, if you know what's going on, you probably can. If you don't know what's going on, how are you going to be decisive? How are you going to be sensible? So you need to understand what's going on with your safety culture and your people. Decision making is informed and swift because you're aware of what's happening. Best information available to the right people. Again, if you're collecting data for data's sake, that's not too clever, really. If you're collecting data to understand where you are, where your safety culture is, where you need to improve, then you're doing the right thing. And safety culture, a lot of people come to us and say, we need a safety culture. Well, you've got one, whether you like it or not. Have a look around. You've got the safety culture that you accept. And again, if you're not understanding exactly what the people are doing out there, if they're hiding stuff, that's not a good place to be. So you're responsible for compliance. And as I said before, people don't have to be compliant. If you care for them, value them, listen to them, they're more likely to be compliant. And of course, as we all know, there's consequences of non-compliance. So you have to think about these things. In terms of where you are with your safety culture, this is something we use at Ryder Marsh Arcade globally. And I don't know if you can see it or read it properly, but on the bottom, it's avoidance of safety. They're the people that are being chased down the road by watchdog cameras. They don't give a damn. You're doomed with those guys. Some people and some of you out there might be minimal compliance, might show minimal compliance. That means you probably need a contract with a bigger company who demand a little bit of certification, compliance. Do you mean it? Well, if you don't, you're going to be caught up in the sort of case studies that we've heard before. The legal questions will be thrown at you and you probably can't answer them. What we do find in the middle there, the yellow and the blue, is that most people are broad compliance, and most companies who we work with around the world are compliant because they've got to be, certainly the bigger ones. But what we find is people become system obsessed. They move to the right-hand side. Something goes wrong, more systems, more paperwork, more policies, more procedures. But what we're finding, you will not get to the next level of your safety culture by focusing on systems. You've got to look differently. You've got to focus on your people, care about your people, and you'll start to improve your culture. And again, that starts with caring about the safety. Where are you? Where's your safety culture? Where are you now? And I bet if we took a poll on the chart there, most of you, or a lot of you, would be probably top of the orange, a lot of you in the yellow, most in the blue from what we know, and hopefully a few in the green. If you're multi-site, you'll probably have a various or varied safety culture, different people in different places, different shifts, different sites will be in slightly different places. So where would you like to be and how are you going to get there? Well, of course, you'd like to be compliant as a minimum, but moving on from there would be a fantastic place to be. As we saw before, it's the right thing to do, the smart thing to do. If you move beyond compliance, you'll start to get better quality, better productivity, well-being will improve. Why wouldn't you want that? And that's about engaging with your people. So how do you actually measure where you are? It's not the easiest thing to do. We can come and sit down with you and interview thousands of people, but that takes a lot of time. How can you do it simply, effectively? Measure your safety culture maturity and actually understand where you are. Just as importantly, how you can improve. So hopefully that gives you insight into how we see safety culture, the importance of it, of actually caring for the safety of your people as a starter for 10. So I'll hand over to Andy now, who's going to give you some ideas on a solution that he has that I think's very powerful, simple, intuitive, and measures your culture and improvement opportunities. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be going through a very high-level overview of what Safe 365 is all about, but just a couple of slides just to explain a little bit about the business and the platform. So the platform sits in the cloud as a software as a service. So all you need is an internet connection to get access to it. And basically what we do is we enable businesses to build a capability around legal requirements and efficiency. So it's basically going to be highlighting capabilities around sort of strengths, weaknesses, and gaps throughout the whole of your health and safety strategy, etc., and see really where the vulnerabilities are to help you improve. The product is continually improving. We deliver new functionality to the platform every 2 weeks. And that's through feedback from our customers. And actually, we're over 3,000 customers now. It's a very low cost, low risk, high value platform as well. So hopefully that's something you'll see as we go through the demonstration. So it's a very, very easy platform to actually get into. The platform itself is underpinned by lots of tools within it, so lots of resources to help you go through your improvements, but it's also underpinned by a risk algorithm as well, which is going to be helping you to prioritize some of your actions. We also see the platform giving business owners, C-suites, executives some real peace of mind as it really starts to visualize where companies are in terms of their health, safety, and compliance. So just a little bit about the platform itself. First and foremost, it's not what I would call an operational management system. Okay, so there are plenty of good systems out there, like the She Softwares, the Alchemists, the Airs Webs, the Sephiras, who do all what I would call all the heavy lifting for you. So they automate a lot of the key processes, through workflows and what have you, whether it be managing your chemicals, your behaviours, your training, your accidents, your incidents, risk audits, and so on and so forth. This is not what we're about here. This is all about measuring your capability and maturity. Okay, so as I mentioned before, it's basically a gap analysis. And what it's going to ask you to do when you first go into the platform is to go through an initial assessment. And this assessment will take roughly about 90 minutes, and you'll be asked about 84 different questions, all in line with HSE compliance and ISO standards. So we typically recommend that, more than one person will do this assessment. So it's an ideal point to get some key stakeholders in the room so you get some consensus across each question to get the true version of the truth. The output effectively provides you with a safety index and a benchmark, so you can actually see where you're starting off, and it will visually show you how and what areas you need to be focusing on in order to improve. We provide various industry benchmarks, which I will go through with you as well. And it will, as I mentioned before, the resources within the product as well will also help you to improve some key areas where you're particularly vulnerable on. We also have a mobile phone app as well, which enables you to capture things like accidents and incidents. You can capture risks and hazards, send out checklists to mobile app users, things like toolbox talks or vehicle inspections and such like. And you can also run things like health and safety surveys on there as well. I'm not actually going to be showing the mobile app today due to time constraints, but I'm very happy to go through that on a one-to-one basis as and when. Okay. Okay, so what we'll do now, we'll just give a very high-level overview of Safe 365. When you first get your license, you basically set the product up, which takes about 5 minutes, literally, putting in your profile of your business. And what I'll ask you as well is to set your goal in terms of compliance. And there's 3 levels. There's basically a compliance level, so basic compliance, there's beyond compliance, and there's industry leader. And we tend to recommend, or most customers do it anyway, set their initial goals as compliance, basic compliance, and then as they progress through their journey of improvement, they can push themselves harder by setting those goals out further if they need to be. So once you've done that, you're then asked to go through the assessment itself. And the assessment itself is broken down into 10 key modules. And you'll see these key modules here on the right-hand side. And you'll also see as well in our starburst here that you can see visually through the color coding of the results of the assessment itself. So red being poor and green being you're doing okay. Each module has a set of questions or disciplines, and these are the spokes on the outside here. So in this particular case, we're looking at about 8 questions there, whereas in the health and safety management system, we can see a lot more, sort of 14 or 15 or so. So in total, there's 84 different questions, and each question will have a 6-level maturity index, and I'll show you that a little bit later. And you basically score yourself from don't do anything through to, we're absolutely really good at this, and we do it very well. But once you've done the assessment, which I say takes about 90 minutes, your output is what you're seeing here. So this is the output, and it initially gives you this safety index score, in this particular case, 47%. Through our customers, if you're running at around about 60%, you're doing okay. You've got some strengths, but you've also got some areas of improvement you need to focus on. So if we look at, say, this particular one, director knowledge, which is showing us that we're pretty poor on, and we can just maybe just go into this in a little bit more detail and just see, just sort of work a use case, if you will. So I'll just click into the module there and open it up. And what it initially gives me is an explanation of, well, what does the legislation mean by director knowledge? So in this particular case, it's telling us that all directors must develop and maintain knowledge of health and safety matters, etc. So it gives us a good description of what our duties are. It then shows us the individual questions or disciplines that we need to be focusing on as well. And you can see here by the scroll bar here how we've scored ourselves. I'll show you that in a little moment. So clearly inductions and meeting agenda we're quite poor on. And the red boxes over here is the risk algorithm kicking in, because this is the risk algorithm suggesting that these are priority areas that we should be focusing on that will have the biggest impact on our safety index score. So if we run through a scenario here, and we'll click on induction here and see where that takes us. So again, it gives us a brief overview of, well, what is the law, what does the legislation mean by induction? It tells us that when we went through the assessment initially, we scored ourselves as we don't do inductions. So if I scroll down to the bottom, this is the question that we would have been presented with when we would have gone through the assessment. So do all directors receive a director level induction on the company health and safety system? And we would have scored ourselves no induction. And this is the 6-level maturity profile that I spoke about earlier. And you can score yourselves anywhere here. So this is, as I mentioned before, it's quite key to have multiple people in the room so you can really build consensus and get to the truth. Because we've scored ourselves as no induction here, it's now giving us some actions to help us improve our rating. So what we can do here, so in this particular case, develop and implement a director induction process, we can drop down this particular area here. And this is where you start to see some of the resources that we have available within the platform. So in this particular case, we're providing you with a director induction template. If you have your own, that's absolutely fine. You can use that. But if you don't, you've got some resources here that you can call upon. And we'll just open that up so you can just take a brief look at it. So what we're seeing here is a template of a director induction form. So you can change this, you can alter it as much as you like. but it just gives you a good starter for 10. So in here, we're able to name who the inductee is, who the inductor is, and this could be the health and safety manager, it could be the director's boss, it could be an external advisor or consultant, doesn't matter who it is. And then we show the induction topics to be covered, the particular actions associated with those topics. So as the director would work through this induction process, and this could, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. This could take 2 or 3 months, for instance. And as they effectively complete these actions, they then can sign that they've done this, and also the inductor would also verify it as well. So this does become a verification document ultimately as it's completed. So this can be then saved into the platform as well. And we have a files section right here. So I've set up a file structure, and the file structure can be set up in any way like you do in Explorer or SharePoint. I've just set one up. I've called it here Director's Knowledge, and you can save all your director induction forms in there. So imagine the scenario where your directors are going through their induction process, and they may have partially completed some of the actions, or indeed completed them. This is where you then go back in and you can re-rate yourselves. So, the administrator might see that there's been some improvements in the induction process, and now, either on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, can come in and think about re-rating themselves. So let's just paint a scenario where all the directors have completed all their induction and they're all doing it really well, and everything's reviewed and so on and so forth. They're complete rock stars at doing it. So if we click on all reviewed annually, what you'll notice immediately is that the safety index score is now increased to 48%. So if I pop back to the dashboard a moment, and we can see that right here with this spoke now obviously showing differently. But you'll notice that this particular module here is still red, and this is the risk algorithm kicking in here saying, you've still got work to do in this particular area. So just very quickly, we'll continue with a use case here, and we'll click on meeting agenda. So this particular case is all about, do you have, as a board, health and safety as an agenda item at your board meetings? When we went through the assessment, we would have scored ourselves as not on the agenda, as you can see, and the question is down here at the bottom in the same way that you saw before. And the actions associated with this particular discipline as well, and the things that you need to do in order to improve your rating. So again, we have some resources available here where we have a meeting template. Again, you can use this, or you can use your own. It's entirely up to you. You would go through the same process as we saw before, and then once you've done that, you can then come in and re-rate yourself again. So let's just play this scenario out again, and let's say that we do this really, really well. And again, you'll see the safety index score increased to 49% this time, and we'll go back onto the dashboard and have a quick look at that. And now we're starting to see some real difference here in terms of our improvement. So this is where the boards and exec teams really like seeing or really like Safe 365, and certainly what our customers tell us, because of the visual nature of what it's showing you, that you can actually see some improvements. In terms of some of the reporting capabilities, every so often you're able to create an assessment report. This could be done monthly, quarterly, however you choose, and all the reports that you create are automatically date and time stamped, so you've got a record of your reports and how you're improving as you go along. So if I open this one here, which is the February one, so this is a very typical assessment report. So at the outset, it gives you an executive summary, which during the creation of this report, you've got lots of fields that you can enter, quite a bit of information in, things like your key statistics of safety incidents that month or quarter, injuries, etc. It gives you a rather nice large space to comment on those particular statistics, any initiatives you've completed, any summary of some sort of work engagement type projects that you've been working on. And then getting into the report, it gives us a very high level overview of what our safety index score is at this particular time. But also we give a sort of a radar overview of where we are on each particular module. So in this particular case, we can clearly see that we're doing not too badly on cultures and behaviours, but we still need to do some work on director knowledge. So again, if you imagine this being used in sort of board style reporting or operational type reporting, you can very, very clearly see where the strengths and vulnerabilities are. We then give a quick overview of what our objectives are, and these are the 3 levels of compliance goals or objectives that I spoke about earlier, and we clearly have selected compliant. And then a quick snapshot of how we're doing across those modules against our organisational goal. And then we give an overview of how you can improve your capability. So we have the modules down here on the left-hand side, and with the recommended actions associated with those particular modules. And these, the board then could start thinking about how they might allocate money, time, resource to key areas where they think is going to have the biggest impact. And as they get knocked off and they get completed, you can then rerun the report, and obviously, this particular part of the report will change. So as you can see, it's a very, very simple way of giving people a really good indication visibly of where health and safety is at that particular time and how it's improving. Okay, the other thing we do as a matter of course within the platform as well is that we will run benchmark reports. So this is something that automatically happens. So if I was to run and show you the February benchmark report, and what this is showing you here is all the industry sectors that Say365 operate in, and all the customers we have, and their average safety index score in that particular sector. Okay, so this is really useful information, so you can really start to understand how you as a business are operating, in line or comparing yourself to other industries. Now, Say365 is being used for small to medium type businesses, but also much larger businesses as well. So if you think about, many of our customers now are starting to push the platform into multiple operations within their business, but also they're starting to push it out to external contractors and supply chain. So you can run these types of reports actually within your own health and safety ecosystem, if you will, and you can really start to compare how other operations and or contractors, supply chains are doing as well. So we can also see here that how we're running against each individual module as well. So verification and audit activities clearly is one that's not performing particularly well at the moment. Can't quite see that one, but here is obviously the one where we are performing quite well at this particular time. So management reporting in this particular case. We can also see here, for instance, that it gives us an indication that 62% of customers have a safety index score of less than 49%. So again, if we're running at 47%, we can start thinking about we're comparing ourselves with our industry peers. Other sorts of reporting that is very useful is what we call a multi-site report. Oops, sorry, just popping into the right area here. Where are we? Reports, there we go. So I mentioned earlier about how organisations are using Safe 365 right throughout their organisation. And this is a typical report, which we call a multi-site report, where you can really start to see all your operations right the way across the business in terms of where they sit in terms of their health and safety index, what the percentage changes over what period of time. But also we can go into the detail and see their individual starbursts and dashboards as well. And it'll highlight for us areas of good capability and areas of improvement. So for instance, at a very easy glance here, we can see that thrust drilling here, for instance, are doing very, very well. But as we scroll down, well, look, Mr. Build It here hasn't even started their assessment yet. So we can really start focusing. Again, it's all about allocating time and resource to those operations that really need help and a bit of a push. The product on the dashboard as well also gives us our maturity as well. So my particular demonstration doesn't bode well to this because I muck around with my demonstration quite a lot. But this is a very typical dashboard which you as a customer might have, where you'll see your starburst, and then at the bottom of the dashboard you'll see how health and safety is improving within your business over a period of time. So this is all about your maturity profile here. Okay. So I mentioned about the mobile app. This is our performance tab here. Comes up. Here we go. So we can report through the mobile app incidents and event reports. We can report risks and hazards. App users can save their safety records, so licenses, certifications, training documents, that sort of thing on the app as well. And you can also push out checklists as well. So you might want to push out to a particular team to run a toolbox talk on a Monday morning, or all drivers to do vehicle inspections before they go out in the morning. And once they've completed those checklists, these are the areas where you can visualize what they've done. And you can drill into here and you can see things, in the reports that's coming in. So any app user who reports an incident or an accident or a hazard or risk or anything like that, they will get a PDF copy on their email, as will the administrator as well of the system will also get a email notification as well. I mentioned about surveys very quickly earlier. So you can push out company-wide health and safety surveys if you wish. It's basically 21 questions or so. This will be pushed out and it will be seen on the app user's dashboard on their mobile phone. But once it's been completed, you can see the results of those reports or those surveys. So in this particular example, we're seeing the top 5 questions and how they were scored. We're seeing the bottom 5 questions and how they were scored. But you can also break down and view the scorings by role as well. So if I wanted to see, for instance, how all the directors scored, we can actually drill into that as well. So this really starts to help create and understand your staff engagement around health and safety. As I say, I'm not going to go through the actual mobile app today, just through time, but I'm very happy to go through this on a one-on-one basis. So that's all I was going to show you today in terms of the product, a sort of quick 30,000-foot view of it. You can actually download a free trial of Say 365 from our website for 21 days. Download it, go through the assessment, download the app from the app stores and link it to the web app here, and you can start reporting incidents, accidents, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to finish there, and I'm going to hand over to Oliver Sanandres, who's going to give you a user perspective of the technology when he was working at Auckland Council.
Okay, hi everyone. So as Andy said, I'm going to sort of give you a user's perspective of the tool. And obviously, in terms of the organisation that I'm sort of focusing on, it's the organisation that I went to work for in 2016. It is a big organisation, but again, I think the flexibility of the tool, as I'll go through, kind of explains itself and how it fits into either a complex environment such as an organisation like Council, and obviously a smaller organisation, as Andy's probably talked us through today. But in 2016, just in terms of some background, I started the role as the head of health, safety and wellbeing for Auckland Council. It was a new role following a terrible fatality, as they all are, over there, one of their rubbish runners or waste collectors. And also they had the new legislation on the horizon as well. So I led the teams through that entire process. And Auckland Council probably is as complex as organisations get. 7 regional cities formed into one true super city. As you can imagine, almost the 32 London boroughs coming together to form one true massive council for London. It is one of the largest local authorities of the Southern Hemisphere. Very complex, large, 10,000 plus workforce, 3,000 contractors. It's complex. And what we really tried to do with the organisation was we tried to kickstart for them an understanding of what safety culture is. And as Kevin was saying, a lot of organizations don't really understand what we call this thing called safety. It's very mythical. They kind of want to do it, but they don't really know where to start, who they are. And in many cases, they've got a health and safety practitioner who can lead them through. Well, that's fantastic. But again, how do we get this to mean stuff to themselves? So the first thing that we kind of did and used the tool for was to really sort of align some of the aims and objectives. And you can see here on this slide, and I apologize, it's quite busy, but top left, you can see that one of their values as a corporate value is to value and empower our people. And it goes back to very much what Kevin was saying. You know, we've got to show to our people that they really mean something to us, and that we're not doing safety for the sake of ticking boxes and complying, but we really want to free them and liberate them in terms of what we do to get the best out of them and to get efficiencies and productivity. So the first thing was really to understand, how do we get visibility of what we're trying to align to an organization? And I think the tool allowed us to really set our performance alongside the direction. You can see it across the top, 2016, 2020 and 2025 in terms of the strategy that we were aiming for. And we were one of those organizations that decided to go for industry leading by 2025. So from our point of view, really, we had to creep the organization in, and we wanted to move from a very compliance, command and control and bureaucratic system obsessed organization to something that was far more meaningful, empowered, ethical and self-serving, really, something that would really generate that, what we call that generative culture. Along this, we also wanted to move from a very, very traditional sort of health and safety framework of safety 1, obviously more into a safety 2. And without being obviously a safety 2 sort of massive fan, some of the tools that we do have within safety 2 in terms of freedom within frameworks and getting people to be part of the solution was really, really powerful in terms of what we wanted to do. So we tried to overlay these, and the tool was fantastic to basically give us and the board an understanding of exactly where they were. So as you can see on the diagram here, you've got October 16 when we did the analysis, and you will see that as a corporate level, as a corporate score, they were at 30%. A lot of red, a lot of amber, There was a lot of work that needed to be done there. And a lot of this can obviously be fixed through the safety management frameworks being set, the policy documentations, which we all did, the procedures, the audits that you do. And you will see that from 16 to March 19, a big jump there, you will see that there is an entire organization moved on. And this was just at the very, very high level, so that the chief exec could see at the time that progress was being made, in what areas of the progress was being made, and what are the areas that we needed to really fix. And you will see the starburst there being quite visual, quite engaging. And what we really wanted to do with the tool, and where the tool really came into itself, was to actually translate that into a visual. So you're not only seeing the index in terms of your numbers growing, which clearly is moving in the right direction, but also those numbers have a meaning because it aligns to ILO and to various other health and safety standards, 45,001, HSG 65 here in the UK. You can have a broadly comparable sort of safety index that said, look, if you get 60%, you're doing really well in terms of you're broadly compliant. If you're here in the 70s and the high 70s or low 80s, you're clearly in that sort of territory. So again, it maps against that sort of cultural sort of climbing of that model. And I think that visual is really, really powerful in terms of showing certainly the board and the chief exec in particular where the organization is going. So they can see things happening, and that's really how we sort of try and engage it. And you will see, for example, like as an observation for me on this one, you will see that in the starburst, quadrant 4, which is bottom right quadrant, is the largest quadrant. That's the one that deals with the safety management system. So you will see in many organizations, you create a safety management system, you have it there. Well, is it working? Well, you can see here it's gone from red in 16 to amber in March. Now, that's because we had a management system, and by all accounts, it should have been green. But the powerful element of the tool is that it allows you to say, well, yeah, we've got stuff, which is why we're amber, but are we applying it consistently? Is it being lived? Is it being used on a day-to-day basis? Is it actually happening? And that's why it's in amber, because actually until you get that assurance that it's actually working and it's seamlessly integrated, you can't really turn it green. So again, it's a really good way of basically getting the chief exec and individual directors to visualize whether this sort of thing is actually living in their organization, or whether it's just a tick in the box exercise in terms of how we're doing. So again, this is the starburst. As I was just talking about, the dashboard really has incredible power behind it, because it allows, particularly when you're on a big journey of transformation and safety, it allows you to chunk up the journey. It's not this big mountain of health and safety, how you're going to do it. You break it up into different areas. And I used to describe this very much like baking a cake. So you've got 10 ingredients. Without these 10 ingredients, you cannot have great health and safety. How you mix them, in what order you mix them, it doesn't really matter, but you're going to need a certain amount of each ingredient if you're following the recipe to get it just right. If you want to get it even better, then you need to add more of this ingredient. I think that's kind of resonated very much with the directors in terms of trying to understand what we wanted to do. So the dashboard for me created that engagement, that pull from the executive team, because they wanted more. They could see where progress was being made. They could see how progress could be made by tapping into some of the tools that Andy was talking to you about in terms of the questions and everything else. So it created a sense of empowerment for our directors, because all of a sudden they kind of knew something that they could really manage. It wasn't nebulous. They could set some really easy performance outcomes. They could set some tasks that to go into their health and safety agendas, where they could talk about strategy and say, right, the strategy for this quarter is going to be to improve elements 1, 2, and 3, which would be our management knowledge, our contractor or worker knowledge, or our management system. So from that point of view, it really does speak business language, because you're actually talking something tangible that can be measured, it's achievable. And again, it's really powerful when you see these things turn in color. People get excited and they can see that actually things are going forward. So it's a really, really powerful tool. I think from that point of view, it was really successful in terms of what we were trying to do. Andy mentioned it a little bit. I've got to stress that it isn't an operational system, okay? It is not there to manage your health and safety. It really is a capability assessment tool. It lets you know how you are doing. So it allows you to check how your system is working. So that's the power behind it. However, if you are a small or medium enterprise, some of the functionality straight out of the box in terms of the performance tools, the instant reporting, for a small and medium enterprise, this is a no-brainer. It's something that really allows you to marry both worlds. For an organization like Council, there's no way that we could have used the basic tools there, because we were just too complex in terms of workflows and responsibilities and accountabilities. But actually, in terms of the flexibility it gives you as a tool, you can be really creative with it. So, for example, the team I was working with got really creative towards the end of the tenure, and they started replicating some of the audit methodologies within the background of the tool and the folders and the files that it gives you, so that we could also measure how we were doing against some of the more statutory audits that we had to comply with. So it really does give you that flexibility, and really it just allows you some great ability to communicate effortlessly within people and within teams in a very visual way. And I think that's something that for me was really powerful in terms of getting that traction. Traditional sort of health and safety practitioners sometimes can't necessarily see the link, because obviously they want to see the risk assessments, and this does not get down to that level. But it gives you an idea of how you're working with some of those processes and how they are working and whether you can measure them. So that was really one of the powerful things I found about the tool. The next slide was really sort of trying to understand maturity. So Andy was also talking about, if you have a large organization with different departments, how you can actually use the tool. And essentially what we were basically trying to pitch across at Council is that we were only as good as our weakest link. So Council isn't just one entity. It's made up of different departments. Different directors had a huge responsibility for departments. And you can see in this slide, you can see two elements of the tool, or three elements rather, combining. So the first one is obviously the actual maturity curve and where we are, all the way from emerging up to way to continuously improvement. The other thing that you can see is the benchmarking element that Andy sort of mentioned in the tool, which for a group of directors, and certainly for the chief exec, particularly in the new light of the new legislation, they all want to know how they're doing, right? You don't want to be the only one standing out there. How are we doing? Are we doing badly? Are we doing poorly? This allows you to see at that instant level how you're comparing with other areas, other industries, and certainly the same industries as yourselves. So you can have a bit of benchmark, which is great reassurance in some respects, okay? But the power behind it as well is that the moment you start opening up those dashboards into departmental tools, you can then break down performance measures even further. So you can then see how we are performing across the organization. And again, this is really powerful for management teams, because they can see where I need to focus my efforts on. So for example, you will see a list of the departments over on the right-hand side, everything from our community facilities department, which was an incredibly complex department managing all the policies and assets for council, and libraries, for example, completely different, but again, a very complex area of its own. So this allowed us to really sort of see how we were doing within the organization, and we were able to focus the resources in my team as the corporate team to support those areas of the business that needed more help, and the others who were doing well, we could just let them fly and crack on. So you're constantly not on their backs, but you're being supportive, and certainly moving towards the concept of the trusted advisor that my team was really trying to take a mantle on. It was really, really powerful in terms of engaging those local management teams and the local areas, and coaching some of those in terms of what it was we wanted to achieve. So, for me, it really was a low cost, low risk and high value option tool, which we really used to the full ability. Again, local government organizations always have to be very prudent with their money, and this gave us a really quick return in terms of what we were doing. So for us, it was a great place to be. In terms of the feedback from our executives, they loved it because of the visibility it gave them. They could see where they were, they could see where they were going, they could see how they needed to improve, how much they've improved, whether interest was waning. So it was a really good active measure for all those to be used. So it's a really powerful way of doing that. And towards the end, really, it just allowed us to really have those conversations around setting a very, very simple target. What is it we want to get? So rather than actually complicating the matter, you just set a number. So we want everybody to get 60% by the end of this financial year. Very clear, very simple, very measurable. And that's kind of how we sort of use the tool for maximum effect. And there's a couple of things that I really liked. The potential for gamification is in this as well, because you could create competition in amongst departments. Everybody likes a bit of gamification, you know, that whole sort of endorphin hit. Can you imagine getting an endorphin hit from doing safety? Wow, that's amazing. But, you know, that's really powerful because actually it's tangible, it's visible, it leaves an audit trail. And at the end of the day, it really gets you it gets you into the process where you're seeing safety as something that is living, breathing, and supporting the organization, as opposed to many traditional views of obstacles and holding organizations back. So look, I think I'm going to leave it there. It's been a rather quick canter through, but hopefully if you've got any questions for either myself, Kevin, or Andy, we're really happy to take them. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Kevin, Andy and Ollie, for sharing your experiences and insights in the Safe 365 platform. As mentioned at the beginning, if you do have any questions, we have got a few minutes now where we can take those. You just need to type them into the chat function, which is on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Alternatively, Kevin, Andy and Ollie have kindly shared their email addresses as well. So if you do have any questions for them, you can see them on screen now, and I will send them round afterwards as well. So please do feel free to get in contact with them directly. Whilst we're waiting for the questions to come through, perhaps could you just sort of talk a little bit more about how the system complements any other sort of like current management systems you have in place?
In terms of management systems, really, obviously there's a plethora in the market at the moment. I think the way that certainly we at Council, for example, we have a management system, and it was a market leading one, and it was great at what it did. But what no management system, as I understand, and Andy might correct me on this, does is it's able to project your capability in terms of your culture and your maturity. It manages all your processes. It lets you know how many risk assessments are outstanding or not. It lets you know how many incidents have been reported or not. But it doesn't let you know where you are in this thing or your journey called safety. So I think this is very much the difference with this tool as opposed to any management system. Andy?
Yeah, and I would agree with that. You know, this is Safety Side 365 would tend to coexist with those operational management systems. You know, we have open APIs here where you can extract some of the data that we're collecting into some of those operational systems if you wanted to do some fancy things with it, but definitely a coexist as opposed to, you know, anything.
Kevin, do you have any views at all? Take your counsel on that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and Andy, would you like to tell us a little bit more about the sector benchmarking as well that you can do via the Safe 365 platform?
Well, yeah, for example of the benchmarking we did, I showed earlier. But what we're tending to do now is get more into industry benchmarking. So we're looking at things like benchmarking across healthcare, construction, for instance, retail, and so on and so forth. So this is really, you know, valuable information if you want to understand how your industry peers or your sector peers are doing. And, you know, again, you know, sort of really comparing how you are doing against your competitors and your peers.
If I can add a little bit to that, one of the things that my executive were really impressed with was because the legislation was new in New Zealand, you know, you had a lot of different industries and sectors, and when they started applying, say, 365, all of a sudden you could see that they probably weren't as great as they thought they were in terms of their maturity and their culture. So all of a sudden, for an organization to see, wow, okay, so we're not too far off, say, the blue chips of this organization. That was really quite encouraging for them. So again, it's just about that. It's about sort of encouraging that sort of honest appraisal and conversation. Hey, and every now and again, you know, looking at the positives of safety as opposed to the failure. Oh, we're not good enough, you know, we're this, we're that. So actually, it positions themselves really good, and it gives them a great grounding and understanding of where they are.
Okay, great. And we just had a comment from John Nelson, who said that there are more than 100 maturity models in the marketplace, but Safe 365 has the agility and flexibility more than most. So,
Good.
And there's a discount for IRSM members at the moment. Andy, would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. We've got an exclusive arrangement with IRSM that if you were to order, and you can do that through the website. So we have an e-commerce engine within the website, and you can put in a code which I believe we can make available, and you'll get a 15% discount off the price of the product. And we're not shy of our pricing. Go onto the website. The pricing is very visual on the website as well.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we're at the end of the webinar now, so thank you again for your time today. And if anyone does have any questions which come to mind later on, then please do feel free to get in contact with Kevin, Andy, or Oliver. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah.